for discussion.
Looking me up
What's up, everybody? Got 1 minute left and we'll get things started. If you don't mind, go ahead and like and share. Keep this thing up to speed. We are going to be talking about what we're talking about. All right, here we are. for episode 43. We're calling this one "Can You Hear Me Now?" And I can hear that.
LaCroix, everybody.
Changing up our camera angles a little bit this evening, and I just want to highlight the aspects of, well, my fantastic beard. So
technology showing the beard off.
That's right.
From
locks of love
from different camera angles.
So that's where we're at this evening. Tonight we're going to be talking about deer vocalization, and I'm sure we'll talk about several other things. Probably this evening we'll keep it a little bit short. The coffee's cold, so
we let the coffee get cold.
Yeah.
We've been pretty prone to getting started later this time of year too, because putting bows together at about 6:05 and trying to start a podcast at 6 is almost humanly impossible.
That's right. What's your take on cold coffee, Lathan?
I'm not a fan. If I do drink cold coffee, I'm not a huge like frou-frou coffee person.
Yeah.
But if I'm going to drink cold coffee, it needs to be frou-frou-y. So I'm basically drinking a sweet and sugary delight stuff.
So it's not really coffee, but more like a milkshake.
Just
coffee milkshake.
Yeah, there you go. Just taking coffee and pouring it over ice or something like people do. I'm like, I like mine hot.
So I know Matt Galloway is a big cold coffee guy.
Is he?
Yeah.
Where are you, Matt? Haven't seen you for a while.
I know.
Going through Matt withdrawals.
He's he told me, he said, I will not be in during the month of November because I've got things on my mind. So
I bet he does. Hunting, and more hunting. Thank you for the bringing me over to the rope scrape side, Matt. It has I haven't killed anything over it, but I do enjoy watching what happens around it.
Absolutely. And I think it's amazing how well those work. It really is.
I put a couple out and they're in the same spot, and I don't even have a camera on one of them, and I haven't even walked to it. They're not probably 150 yards apart, and I haven't hunted that side of the woods at all. I'm saving it. It's one of my dash, like those mad dash places that you hunt.
You have to have those.
That you get in really easy. You can get into them later of an evening and not spook deer. So I'm just not even touching that side of the woods until, more or less, my thought is I've always been able to have good hunts there late season.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, I'm just not even going to mess with that until then. And I haven't even hunted that spot hardly at all. I've only hunted it twice. And I was all over a big one in there the day before yesterday, the first hunt. But anyhow, all around that rope scrape back there, a lot of activity, and it looks like it has been abused.
Yeah.
When I got there, I was sitting there that I hadn't been there for I hunted at one time when the wind got right earlier, probably the last couple of days of October. And then I hunted it yesterday morning. The wind got good and I went back and hunted it. And it was still dark, and I was looking down in the dark at that rope and the scrape, and I was like, I can tell there's been some activity here.
Yeah.
I mean, it's about the size of a car hood.
Yeah.
The scrape underneath that rope, but pretty impressive.
If you guys get a chance next year, you really need to do that. I mean, they're still using the scrapes, but
sure, it's not a primary thing now.
It's not.
And
their minds are on other things.
Yeah, I probably should have really been beating some hunts, but I couldn't get a wind to work for it. We kept having, I think, I'd like to hunt that rope scrape when they're cruising and more checking those scrapes and hitting on them, but I just couldn't get the wind. I was like, I'm not going to mess it up, so I was hunting other places, but.
So before we get too deep into vocalization, and this part will be part of it, but let's talk about how your hunts are looking and what you're seeing as far as the deer movement.
Well, since I don't know, Saturday. What's today? No, since Monday, about every time I've been out, deer bucks are, I mean, singled out on one doe. So basically locked up with does.
Yeah.
And people talk about the lockdown and how dreaded it is. And I don't hate it, but I have noticed the last 2 days, all I seen really hammering feet on the ground was 2-year-olds and the occasional 3-year-old.
Yeah.
Haven't seen no mature deer. Now I was all over a big one yesterday morning, one that I would definitely shoot. He was a 4-year-old for sure, maybe older, but I know he's at least 4. I don't have history with him camera wise to tell you, but I mature, put it fully mature, put it that way. But he stayed in one place from 6:15, 6:30, whenever you can see good. It's the first time I seen him. He came in with his doe and they stayed there till 2:00.
That's one thing I don't feel like a whole lot of people talk about is the progression of the rut in regards to, there's like stages. So like there's the initial young bucks are kind of filling their oats. They're, they're touching off and rattling just a little bit, or, fighting and sparring off with each other a little bit. And everything gradually progresses with the age of the deer, it seems like. So like you've got your spikes that start out,
right,
and then before long you start seeing 2-year-olds that are doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And because that's the case, you can kind of tell roundabout where things are moving, where, I feel like.
Yeah. Your 3-year-olds, 3.5-year-olds start coming online, and doing their thing. It is kind of a progression. I think, I don't know, as far as back to what I've seen, and I don't know if people, and I heard this in the shop today, so we get lots of intel just that comes in the shop.
A lot.
Of what people saw today, saw yesterday. And people, deer hunting's a magical thing where everybody wants to tell their story, and I love that about it. But so I listened to the people today, and I don't know how many, 3 or 4 or 5 people are seeing the occasional big one in the last day and a half, but they're like, man, lots of young ones bouncing all over the place. Well, you need to know right now, the reason you're seeing 2 and 3-year-olds and yearlings bouncing all over the place and not Mr. Big is because he is somewhere with a girl.
Yeah.
So that being said, I tell people not to lose heart, because eventually he's going to leave her and he's got to go find another one. And you could find him in that in between seek and cruising moment, trying to find the next doe he's going to lock up with. Now, it is kind of heartbreaking when you have lots of does. He might come off that doe and move, 200 yards and be locked up again with another one. He might move her out into, people's come in seeing lots of big ones out in the middle of cornfields or something like that. It's because that's where they want to be. They're locked up with the doe. They're going to get her out of the thickets, out of those cruising places.
And this is my favorite time of year because of that. Like you get to see the deer that a lot of times you don't get eyes on.
Yeah, they're out.
They are out.
You have to revamp. If you have, and we've been covering this the last couple of weeks, if you have hunting places that has good cut corn that's cut high. I know a lot of these new systems are bobbing it off at the ground and even bush hogging it.
Yeah.
And that hurts you a little bit. That don't mean they won't lay there, but you can't do nothing with them.
It's rough though.
You can't do nothing with them. But I'm telling you, in good old-fashioned cut corn that's 16 inches, it's work, but you can crawl out there to those deer.
Oh yeah.
And get them. If you have rolling terrain, stuff like that, you can use hills and stuff to your advantage. And it seems like they like to lay in it more. It's like that 16 to 14 inch corn stalk is just enough. They can hunker down in it, and it's like they.
And I think they naturally go out there to feed anyways. Sure. And once they disc it and till it all under, that ceases to happen, or at least in a large part.
Right. But you don't want to look at a guy and tell him not to set in his rut funnel.
Yeah.
Because if you set there, like I said, you could catch Mr. Big in between does, and he's going to go back to where does go. to find another doe.
Does do what does do.
Does do what does do. But in the middle of the day, man, if you've got those places, if you got several acres, circle your ground, look those cut corn. Cut Milo is a no-brainer for me.
Cut Milo is our favorite.
I've said this.
Hands down.
A cut Milo field, a little weed patch that's, out to itself in the middle of a field somewhere. I've been known to go to those weed patches in the middle of the day, climb a tree, not in my stand, just climb up and stand on a limb and watch that patch. We used to do that a lot in one place. We'd go there, walk to the fence row, of course, with the wind right, climb up in a tree, stand on the fork of a tree for 15, 20 minutes and just watch it. And all of a sudden you'd be like, oh, right out in the middle of the weed patch is a big buck with a doe.
Oh.
Well, then you're in the game.
Yeah.
In the same way with Milo.
On Milo, they cut it just a freckle taller than the corn. Taller. Yeah.
I've said this, and I think I'm reiterating some stuff, but this is lockdown hunting.
Yeah.
And most people don't do it. There was a guy in here that bought a bow just a while ago that does it.
Yep.
He's onto it. And I think one of his exact words was, some of my best deer have been lockdown bucks and using terrain or corn or something.
Here's what's nice about the lockdown bucks. You can see them out there and glass them and be like yes or no before you ever make the first step.
Right. I found one on the way. I got down this morning at around 9:20 because I was like, shop opens at 10.
Sure.
I was like, well, I got time to swing past a field where I know bucks locked down.
Yeah.
Out in the wide open all the time. It's like Grand Central Station lockdown field. And I drove past there and there was one.
Yeah.
Because I thought if it's one that I'm willing to spend the next 2.5 hours crawling on, I was going to call you and be like,
sure,
I'm on one. I'll
be a while.
Yeah, I'll be an hour and a half or two possibly behind. Found him locked down with a doe, bedded in cut corn. And I was like, he's a nice buck, don't get me wrong, but I was like, I'm just not ready to crawl 300 yards, whatever it was, and try to get the wind right and then sneak up on him because he was, 130. Yeah. And that's, I don't want to knock that deer, but
no,
at this point in the game, that's not what I'm going after, so anyway, you can find them. You got to look for them though.
We have a lot of conversations that happen in the shop. And I think they're good conversations to have, and they apply to different people at different points in their life. Like your Uncle Keith came in today.
Right.
And he killed a buck that was a solid buck. And he said this is the first buck he's killed in 9 years.
I should have went out and see. I didn't even see it.
Yeah, it was a nice one.
Was it?
But he told me, he said, I told myself I'm not going to kill anything smaller than the last one I killed. And he said, I've waited 9 years and decided if that's my standard, I may never kill a buck again.
Right.
And he said, I decided that's not my standard anymore.
Good for him.
Yep.
Love you, Uncle Keith.
So I think there's times when you need to say, I need to do what is necessary to keep me interested and involved.
My standard is fluid.
Yeah.
Like it could change in 3 days. I'm going to tell you, I have let this year, gosh, I bet 4, 5, like that I would say were like, I would have killed that buck because it was 20 yards, 25 yards, shots that I'm pretty confident I'm going to make this shot. It wasn't like, people say, I could have killed a buck with, it's 60 yards walking through timber, that's iffy.
Yeah.
I could shoot at that buck, but I'm talking, I've even got some of the video on my phone. I'm talking bucks that stayed close that are nice bucks, 3.5-year-old bucks. And I don't even think it's sacrilegious to kill a 3.5-year-old. I know I can upset like a whole passel of people out there right now, but so I'm back. My standard is somewhat fluid.
So
I hunt hard. I'm looking for something. I have something in my mind. I want a solid 4.5-year-old buck, but gosh, I'm also a deer hunter.
Yeah.
And when I reach a certain point, generally around Thanksgiving, and I haven't put a tag on a deer, I start thinking, now that 130 that was bedded in that corn today with the doe, I'm starting thinking, it would be pretty awesome to crawl across there, raise up from 30 yards in a wide open field, shoot that buck, and I would be just as tickled. I promise you, I'd be just as tickled to kill that deer. And some people are like, I don't believe that, or you would have killed it today. No, I'm fluid.
Yeah.
I'm pretty set on one thing, and it may switch in a week or two. Who knows?
So I'm throwing that question out to those that are watching. What's your standard for a shooter buck? So this question has been like bouncing around in my head kind of all day.
Cool.
Because Josh sent us a text earlier in the day and said that he passed on a decent one. And my question in my head was, what's a decent one? Because there's days when I'm like, that one's decent. And then the next day I'm like, maybe that one was better than I thought it was. And that one's decent.
Yeah.
Is decent the standard? Like, does it need to be a good buck? Or is decent determined by age? Like, is it more about mature than it is about decent?
For me, that is it.
Yeah. And I think that's the question.
Because
like
inches and all that don't necessarily equal IQ.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Somebody hasn't got him, I've got a picture. I took it, seen him back in October. Great big fat hog buck, especially before he run any of his weight off, with good mass 8-pointer that I venture to say may just go a little over Pope and Young. And I know I say this all the time, Pope and Young, something we don't even talk about anymore. Used to, people tickled pink to kill a nice Pope and Young buck. That's something we don't even talk about anymore. But he was a Pope and Young class buck, but it's obvious he's an old, I don't know, 5, maybe 6. His gut was dragging the ground. He had good mass. His neck was as big around in the second week of October as a 5-gallon bucket. He's a big old fat old buck, and I would probably be just as tickled. And he's not going to score. He might make it to 130, as an 8-pointer. I don't know. He would be hard pressed to get there. But his IQ is probably higher than a lot of deer that's 160, 155. That are because there's 150-inch 3-pointers decently common now.
Yeah.
3-pointers, 3-year-olds, sorry.
3-year-olds, yeah.
That genetics are good. You get 10-pointers that push up there to 150, and they're just 3.5 years old, and he don't have the wisdom that
of a man.
He don't have the wisdom that a 4.5,
the speed of a puma,
5.5 year, the wisdom of a man. He don't have that because he hasn't been around as long.
Sure.
And 3.5-year-olds, I've rattled in like 4 of them this year.
Yeah.
And there's a reason I've rattled in 4, or maybe it's 3. I want to exaggerate. There's a reason I've rattled within to shooting range 3 or 4 or 3.5-year-old bucks.
So that kind of transitions into what we're going to talk about this evening. The whole, can you hear me now? What do you do in regards to deer vocalizations that you feel like would set you apart from the average hunter?
We've talked about it a lot, and it's almost it. I guess you would put it in the vocalization class, because rattling isn't necessarily a vocalization, but it works like one.
It does, and it is still an auditory thing that they hear.
Yes.
And because of that, we definitely want to classify it in this as well.
2 of the bucks that I had this year run to me. Like, I looked up and they were literally not galloping, or like, I don't know what you'd call that, but a fast trot. How a buck trots through the woods. A fast trot to me was, I rattled real short. And I've got my cord hooked on my my draw that I pull my bow up with, I get up there and I hook it on my rattling horns. My rattling horns are up there with me. I rattle from the tree because you can get pretty loud.
Sure.
So I get real loud for a second, then just drop them, and then just drag them in the brush and tink them around every once in a while.
That's a good idea.
And 2 bucks, I mean, this year I had 2 like run to me. I looked up and I was like, I mean, you know, I didn't know they were anywhere in the neighborhood, and they're on me in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Like, where's it at? And my thought was, I'm going to make some noise, because I think some of the brush and just with the rope, I don't know that they would hear it out there.
Do you find that in regards to rattling, there's a point where rattling isn't as effective?
You mean in the time frame of
Yeah.
the rut?
Well, yeah, because I think it's very effective early on, and I think there's a period where it's not quite as effective because they're starting to group up with does.
Yeah.
And that's not their primary thought is, I want to go out there and kick his butt.
Right.
Instead, I want to be with her.
Right.
And
two of
then,
the ones that I rattled in were very recent.
Yeah.
Last couple of days.
Well, I think it transitions back. And the reason why is because they start, a lot of those does are bred. I think you can start rattling them back in more consistent again.
I've always said my data that I've collected over the years that I don't have written down, it's all just in my head. So you can't see it. You just have to trust me. But, and you've been in on some of this.
Sure.
We've both done it together. Some of the best rattling I've ever done is like 4 to 5 days from now.
Yeah.
To Thanksgiving.
Yeah. I think early you rattle well, or I think you see results out of it.
Yeah.
I think there's, and don't get me wrong, I think you can almost always rattle up a buck that is not tied to another animal at that point.
Right.
But I think there's almost a lull that happens with rattling, and then it, I would say, even goes beyond what it started out. Like, I think when you're talking like sometime around first gun to, and I think part of it is because they get pushed out of the areas that they are in.
That was always my theory.
Yeah. Because once that's the case, and for those who aren't from Illinois, once first gun happens here in Illinois, deer get displaced on a massive level.
Yeah, because people don't understand when the gun season in Illinois comes in, there's the first season's only 3 days.
Yeah, and there's a reason why they call it the Orange Army.
Yeah,
I mean, there are people everywhere.
I mean, the schools around here close down that day.
Yeah,
so all the kids can go deer hunting, because you've only got, it's not like you've got 2 weeks to scatter out and get some hunts in. No, you got 3 days to do it that first season. Well, by that happening, like you said, the Orange Army, people push deer, they drive deer, everybody's in the woods, people are shooting in and out, 4-wheelers, bikes,
yeah,
side by sides. I mean, I'm not saying they're driving them with those, but there's an onslaught of 4-wheelers and side by sides going into the woods. There's people walking. There's every patch of timber.
There's a massive displacement.
Yes, it's moving deer around,
and because of that, the week after first gun season is phenomenal.
I have rattled in I've had some crazy, and we've had some crazy rattle sessions where multiple bucks showed up.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking 3.5-year-olds.
No, good deer.
4.5, 5.5, 160s pushing Boone and Crockett deer come to the rattle like a 3-year-old comes to it.
Yeah.
And the only one of my theories always was that displacement. And I was like, I guess because they're filling the press to find the last doe, maybe,
Yeah.
And also, I think you get dominant bucks that have been displaced, and now he's in a zone that he's not so familiar with, and he's like, there is bucks here fighting. I'm going to get in on it and maybe get the doe, or I don't know, really. No one will ever know what goes through their mind, but for sure the data says,
the world may never know.
The data says after that gun season, I mean, you know me, like the years we've hunted together, it's like, oh, we're rattling this morning, the first morning or
Yeah.
2 or 3 after gun season that we get back in the woods. And then Thanksgiving, rattled in lots of deer on Thanksgiving weekend. And I just contribute to that. Of course, that is in between the 2 gun seasons,
Sure.
I guess.
Yep.
But I think it's probably a mixture of that displacement. And I think it's also probably, I think, a lot of they've bred a lot of does and you're going into the post. And I think it's just like, got to find one more girl, and if there's 2 bucks fighting, there's only one thing they're fighting over.
Sure.
It's another doe that's in heat. So that's the only thing. That's my favorite time. Now I've had years where it's like nothing, in between the gun seasons. I beat horns every time and nothing shows up. Now this new thing I've done, now people have tied their horns
Sure.
together and dropped them and clanked them down on the ground together. But this year I was like, I'm going to try something here because I want to get their attention a long ways off. I'm hoping way out there in the timber or way out there in the thicket, 200 yards away, they're going to hear me. And I was doing that and I was like, I don't know if they'll ever hear that unless they're just sitting there with their ears radared right to me and
Sure.
everything's just right. But I thought, I know I can get loud enough.
Yeah.
So I'm talking like 10 seconds, 8 seconds of just real loud. And my thought was, if they're out there, I'll get their attention and then drop them and the brush crashing and them kissing together down there. And I was impressed a couple of times. I was like, that sounds like deer feet hit the ground. And
that's a good idea.
And
I like that idea.
And twice, they came running in. And I was like, maybe I stumbled onto something here. Get their attention. It's kind of the same thing we did with the grunt call when a deer is 180 yards out in a set-aside field and you grunt at them and they don't even turn their head or stop walking. And we get their attention with a bark or a, hey, and they stop and turn their ears to you and then lay a nice love grunt out there. And they're like, oh, you could tell then they reacted to it. So it's kind of the same thing. Beat the horns, get their attention loud, then drop them on the ground and make the other sounds. And when they hear the brush mixed with the horns tapping together, I was like, twice it's worked for me really good. I think the only 2 times I've done it. And I looked up and granted, they're just nice 3-year-old bucks that aren't huge rack deer, just good 8 points or something like that. But they come in there like on a string, literally.
So in regards to grunting, what do you have a favorite grunt? And also, what is your thoughts in regards to grunting? Do you do primarily buck? Do you do fawn bleats? What are your thoughts?
I have done just primary buck. Every once in a while, I was like, why didn't you turn your call down or get a bleed out and do that some? But I get hung up on a buck, and I don't think I'm a good grunter. I always have it in my head, I'm going to stick to this grunt.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get too crazy. Then there's a buck walking out through the woods. The next thing I know, I'm blowing it like a trumpet, trying to get his attention. I have grunted in a lot of deer over the years, but it's a funny thing. The grunt call can be a funny thing to me because it's like, I had a buck the other day, and I know he's just a 3.5-year-old buck. He was only about 80 yards away. And I was like, I'd like to see him come over here closer. And I would grunt, and I don't, I know he heard it.
Yeah.
I know he heard it because I watched him turn his head and put his ears towards me. And he did not spook, but he did not throw any interest in coming.
Huh.
And my brain wants to figure out now, why in the world? Because I know he wants to be around other deer. I can tell the way he's acting. He's over there rubbing trees and stuff before I grunted. So he's like doing the thing that should say, I'd like to come in and check out. And a lot of people's like, oh, it's because he's scared. It's because he's scared, And that may be because he's there's a big buck around. That could be. But I've always had a problem with that theory.
Why is that?
Because I watch those same 3-year-olds test fate all the time. I watched it for 4 hours yesterday morning.
Yeah.
3-year-old bucks come running in on a big buck and his doe. And he, I mean, obviously he'd get up and go towards them and they're out. They'll
Sure.
check out.
Yeah,
But I'm like,
they're not incredibly scared to check it out.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know that he would have a problem with coming and looking. You know, maybe they are. Maybe they're like, there's a big buck in here and he wants to kick my butt and I'm not going over there. Maybe that's the psyche that's going on in their mind.
Well, I had a good buck this morning that was tending a doe. And around him there was a 3-pointer, a forkhorn, and a nice 8. And they were all in there interested.
Yeah, that 3-pointer probably ran right in there every time he turned his head.
Sure.
You know, and I'm like, they're scared because soon as the buck like goes towards them, they check right back out and they run out there, 40 or 50, 60 yards, and they stand there and like planning their
then they come back.
Yeah, they're planning their next move, you know.
Yeah.
So gosh, I don't know if that works, because I've heard that all my life. It's like, well, you grunted and he listened and he just didn't pay no attention because he's scared.
I think it has more to do with the language you're speaking.
It could be.
Like if I'm speaking French and you're speaking English, you're not going to understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Now don't get me wrong. One grunt versus another. I mean, I think it literally can be as simple as it just has to sound right to them. And then they're like, yep, I'll go check it out.
And here's the deal. I've heard tons of grunts this year from actual deer.
Yeah.
I had a crazy awesome hunt the other day. It was a nice 8-point buck, 3.5-year-old buck, I believe. And he bred a doe 25 to 20 yards from me, 30 yards. They just walked circles and he was working his hardest to get her bred. And I think she was a yearling. It was her first go around. So he had a hard time getting her to stay in one place, but they never left. It was like a 2-hour ordeal I got to watch. He grunted. He must have grunted 30 times around me.
Huh.
The grunt, I was paying attention. I was like, this is a learning time for me. The grunt that he displayed, you could never get a deer to hear that to be effective to pull him to you.
Is that the one that was the grunt and snort wheeze?
No, that one was.
It was just a really soft tending grunt. Yeah.
You know, and I'm like,
it wasn't nice, man.
It wasn't much louder.
I'd come to that.
It wasn't much louder than that. I'm thinking, I was paying attention. I'm thinking if I was trying to be him, and get another buck to come to that, if that buck knows I'm putting enough on that, like there's no way within 50 yards. And at that point, what's it matter? I mean, they're in the zone already anyway.
Sure.
Now, maybe you can grunt them in closer from 50. And I do go back, as I watched that, I went back through the years. Most of the bucks, not all, most of the bucks I've grunted in have been in like a 60-yard window, and you're like, I need them to close a little more, and you give them you turn and give them a soft grunt, and they come. And they close it to 30 or something.
That's an interesting thought.
Because I listened to him all evening grunt. It was, and I was like, I'm 20 yards from him, 25, 30 yards from him. And I heard it, but I was like, I just heard it. Now, I heard him do an awesome grunt, but it wasn't very loud either. But it was I bet it was a good 8 to 9 seconds long.
Yeah.
After he'd done the deed, finally got it done, and they were still walking circles and doing their thing and trying to decide if they want to lay down there. I don't know what they's doing, or if he's going to breed her back to back. He did like an 9 second, just
no
just
kidding.
I was like, man, I wish I would have had that recorded, because I've been recording him on and off all evening. Now he snore wheezed 10 to 12 times. There were several little bucks that showed up and tried to come in on his little.
What did a snort wheeze sound like?
He did not do. Now I have heard the full.
No, none of that. Yeah,
I've heard that, the full one, and you can hear it real well. These were very quiet. It was more just a spit at him.
Yeah,
he just at him, just kind of a whistly spit, and it wasn't. It was the same way. I'm 30 yards from him. I was like, I heard it, but it wasn't. No buck heard that from 80 to 100 yards away.
Huh.
So I sometimes think
we call too aggressive.
Probably, but the problem with that is you have to get them to hear you from that far.
Yeah, but that might be why they don't respond when they do.
They don't respond as well.
Because they're like...
But I think the ones that do they're either young, or if they're a big one that responds, they've just crossed, because sometimes they just cross over into plumb stupid.
Yeah.
And if they get in, they got their rut goggles on and their Coke bottle glasses, and they're seeing so fuzzy that they just hear something and they want to be with the doe so bad they come to check it out.
Sure.
I don't know, but I watched that buck the other evening, because I'm not kidding. It was a 2-hour deal. I don't know when I sent you the first picture of him.
Oh yeah.
And it happened until almost dark. They came in. I hadn't been in the stand 30 minutes. They came in, and it was the whole evening. He was just riding her around trying to breed her, and they just stayed right there. And I was like, this is so awesome to watch. But I just used it the whole evening as trying to learn what goes on in this situation. And the grunts were very soft. And when you hear now, throw that all out, because I've heard a few grunts that were like over exaggerated growly things. Remember when Mad, the Jury Boys, come out with the growl? I've heard that a couple times, but man, not very often.
Yeah, that vocalization,
it's hard to even make too.
It is. And the fact that guys can use that in the woods, if you use that very much, you've already overused it. Because it's just, well, I mean, you said it already. I mean, we've been hunting now for years, and we've only heard it a couple times.
A couple
so
times, yeah.
that really would indicate that it's not a sound that they're making very often.
Right. And
if they are, it's a very aggressive, dominant thing. And there's a chance that to do something like that, it might push deer, repel deer rather than bring them in. That's a tough call.
Yeah.
Like you can see that there's not a whole lot of guys that are using that call any longer.
Right.
But
they marketed it well, and everybody bought one.
Sure.
And they had remember they had footage. They got footage of a buck doing it. And I remember when it come out, I was like, well, I've heard that before.
Yeah.
But man, very sparse. I bet I ain't heard it in, man, I bet I ain't heard it in 10 years or better, 9, 10 years. But
like,
yeah. I mean, it's like, the only way I could explain it, it's a grunt that he started, and then he decided, oh, I got to run hard. And he's like planting his feet
pushing
to go,
while
he pushes out from his diaphragm real hard and turns it into an over exaggerated grunt, really, that maybe sounds
and really that's what I think it is. It's just an over exaggerated grunt.
There's a lot of people haven't heard this one, and I've only heard it a few times. I think me and you were together one time. I almost said the place. I'm trying not to say places next to a town that we were close to, but anyhow, south of Chicago somewhere. But I think we were together, real open woods, and 2 bucks were chasing a doe, and they're running side by side. And I've heard this a couple times, heard it with my Uncle Brad a couple times. And like every time for several licks, when they're like horse racing,
I know exactly what you're talking.
They're snorting as their feet hit the ground. Snorting at each other, like almost like running side by side, looking at each other.
And they were doing some of that, like looking at each other,
just
while
running
happening.
wide open, chasing a doe, horse racing, to see who could, outrun
who gets her first,
and blowing. And a lot of people associate that blowing is a real bad negative thing when a doe or a deer starts snorting and blowing at you. And it wasn't really. It's different than the way I hear it. It's different than the I smell you, I see you snorting.
Sure,
that we hear. But when people have a fit, when does and stuff start snorting and blowing at you, I used to, but I'm about to a place I don't want it to happen. Don't misunderstand me, but it don't bother me too much, because over the years I've watched this deer blow and throw a fit, and 40 yards away, an old buck's over there like, I don't know what you're blowing at, but I could care less, and the other deer, it may make
it doesn't always key them up. And this time of year, if it happens, I use it as a platform to call back.
Yeah.
Like, so as soon as it happens, a lot of times I'll do some sort of rattle or some sort of real aggressive grunt at that point, because I've seen deer respond to other deer in even that manner if it's something that is happening that they don't like.
I've heard a lot of people say if she blows, she's got to go. Is that
Yeah.
you know? And I'm of the thought, especially during a rut, and I'm wanting to shoot a nice buck, and I was like, if I shoot her, I way more probably mess up this scenario than her just snorting around there a little
Sure.
bit. But maybe not. That's just my opinion. I could be wrong. But I used to blow when I first started hunting. They used to make calls that you snort.
Sure. Yeah.
And of course, not snort wheeze. They were things you put in your mouth this way and you blow through.
Yeah. Sounded like a
hard.
doe.
And then I was doing it one time, and this is way back, 7th grade, and I was like, I think that's the sound they make when they're upset and spooked. I was like, so why am I making? I'm just trying to sound like deer, but because it wasn't the snore wheeze. The snore wheeze didn't become a real popular call. It blew in, it was probably always around, but it grabbed some popularity where everybody's snore wheezing now
Sure.
on videos, and I've had the snore wheeze work to some degree. I'll never forget Bart Lawhorn was with me one time. A buck was circling us. Now I didn't get him to commit, but when I snore wheezed at that buck, he just stopped what he was doing, slammed on the brakes, just stuck his rack in some honeysuckle and just started threading and tearing the honeysuckle and rubbed the tree raw and then went on. He didn't come in, but Bart was like, man, I just knew he was coming in. I was like, I thought he was too. He's a nice, 140-ish good buck. We were going to take him, but couldn't get him to come in. But it's like you could tell it torqued his wrench. He was upset. I mean, it's obvious when he just slams on the brakes because he's walking out through the honeysuckly woods, and I snore wheezed at him. He just slammed on the brakes and starts hooking brush, and I was like, oh, we got him, he's coming. He hooked brush and went on. I was like, I don't know. It's like he knew where he's going. He just wanted to let him know that I can do that.
I could whip you if I wanted.
I can throw a fit too, but and someone may say, well, he thought you were a bigger buck and he wouldn't come over, and maybe that could be true.
Yeah.
But I've seen so many deer test the fate over a doe, run in there and almost get a horn in their butt, and not leave and come back for more. So I don't know. I do think they're scared of bigger bucks, but are they scared to be in the zone with them? Not so much that I've seen.
Sure.
I mean, they're going to run from them every time when they come towards them, but
do you use fawn or a doe bleat very often?
I probably need to get back to that, because if you remember when we modified the can, we had a lot of deer come to it.
Oh, yes, we did.
So I was sitting up there the other day. I was like, why don't I do that anymore?
Yeah.
Because the can blew in too. Remember, everyone had a can.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, give me a can. And we modified one where we could actually blow through it and not just be stuck to the same.
Yeah.
Exact. Yeah. The same 2.5 second. We could make it longer, shorter, or something like that by blowing it. But
and you could variation within how much pressure you put to it too.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It was
and
nice.
they even put a tube on it. If you remember, put a tube
did.
on it so you could make it more throaty or not if you wanted to. But probably we don't have a can in here, do we? We need to
open up a can.
I need to get another can call, because I remember us using that and having, they were probably just 3-year-old bucks. I don't remember, but nice bucks come stomping in on us when we blow that sometimes. Turn them on a dime.
It does, man. I think there's something with a doe bleat that will definitely bring them in, and especially this time of year. Like, their mindset is find a girl, find a girl, find a girl.
Right. When we're turkey hunting, we're sounding like a girl turkey.
Yeah.
More than anything.
Sure.
Now, when we go elk hunting, we do lots of
and I think you don't hear doe bleats outside of, you'll hear some mild grunts from does.
Yeah.
But I don't think you hear a doe bleat except for this time of year when they're like, come check me out.
They claim there's an estrus bleat.
Yeah.
Now I can't say that I've ever sat there and heard a doe do that.
Yeah.
Have you? That have you ever heard that?
I don't know if I have the long.
I don't know that I have, and I'm not saying it's
Now,
not out
I
there.
have heard does, though, while they've got a tending buck, let out a you know, but nothing that is prolonged.
The most doe vocalizations I've ever heard, and I'm not saying I haven't heard them around bucks, but the most doe vocalizations I've ever heard, like in the bleat, is when they're early October with their fawns.
Yeah.
Like I've heard them bleat at their
That's
fawns.
when they're very vocal.
Yeah. Several times this year early, I was there and they were still with fawns, and their fawns would be out in the cornfield or something. They bleat at them, you know, I guess they're communicating, saying, hey, stay close or whatever, whatever it is they're saying.
Come to mama.
Yeah, but I have heard
that's what they're saying this time of year too, though.
But I have no doubt that the estrus bleat is a real thing, because we blowed it and had bucks show up. Now maybe they're just showing up because they think, well, there's a mama over there talking to her babies, I'm going to get in on this action. But or is it an estrus bleat? There's just, you know,
I know Joey, he was all about the mama call.
The mama call.
Yeah.
And it was just a estrus type doe bleat, or what they would call that.
Yeah, it was definitely a doe bleat, but it was more geared towards a fawn, like targeting a mother to a fawns.
Oh,
so
I thought it was more like what they would call an estrus bleat. But
well, maybe I'm wrong.
I could be wrong. It was a tube call, right?
Yes, it was.
It was a tube call. So it wasn't a can that you flip over.
I remember one year he bought us all mama's calls.
But it had, I probably lost mine 100 times.
You've lost a lot of stuff.
There's lots.
We usually find it somewhere.
There's lots of grunt tubes. And you remember the year we went up to your place up north and hunted?
Yeah.
And we got in the stand, and we'd been in the stand, and it got good in daylight. And I was like, man, there's a big set of sheds underneath our stand. And when we got done hunting, we got down, it was our rattling horns from the year before. I was like, yeah, well, there they are. All squirrel eaten.
Man, we've lost so much stuff.
Had the orange rope still between them.
We couldn't see that. Leaves had
fallen. The leaves,
on top
you could just see the tine stuck up out of the leaves. We got up and stand and like 8 feet underneath us from the tree we're in. I think you were like, hey, there's sheds underneath of us.
Man, we found some good sheds over the years, deer hunting.
Yeah, there's one right there.
Yeah.
Right there. That shed that laid on the table here for a while. That was the one you had climbed up in the tree and getting the camera stuff, and I was getting ready to come up, and you whispered, you said, hey. I said, what? I said, don't let me forget to pick up that big shed that's laying out there when we get down, like, 12 yards from me. Once you got up in the tree, you can see it. Big shed. Good deer. We never seen that animal.
No.
That I remember. That
I think we did.
You think so?
I think we did.
I don't remember ever seeing him, because I remember after we found that shed, because this is the shed from the year before. Now it's deer season. We hunted in there like crazy, thinking we would see him. And
I think we did one day. Remember, we were driving along the road, and then there was one very, very similar chasing a doe inside that woods.
Yeah. Yeah, you may be right.
I think we might have saw him.
He's long gone now, because that's been 15 years ago.
Well, we didn't do an hour, but
there we go.
You know what? We've got some stuff that's coming up next week on Tuesday, the 19th. Matthews will be releasing their new bow.
The new Matthews bow.
Yep.
We should have one, right?
Yeah, we will have it.
As long as nothing changes.
We'll have 3 of them. So
come in and shoot them. See what's up.
Yep. So next Tuesday, we will have, I would say we probably won't get it in the shop until noon, just knowing how UPS usually delivers. And the Bowtech has announced their date. The date for their release is the 25th. Not sure what. Let me pull that up on the calendar. That would basically be the following Monday. So
back to back, new flagship bows out from 2 big names.
Yep. So we will have those in. Next week we'll have the Matthews, and the following week we'll have Bowtech. So
nice.
Yeah.
And
So
PSE and all them are already out, aren't they? PSE and
PSE
and
is
Darton.
out. PSE released the Decree. They released the Mach 33, and they released the Brute NXT.
yes,
Yeah, a new version of it.
And
So
then Darton come out there with their new sequel,
Yep.
Squared.
Yep, Darton is the sequel squared.
It's ST, isn't it? Or
yeah, ST2
for super
ST square.
super tunable squared or something like that.
So they
and I'm
released
shooting
it.
one right now. I like it. Got a 35 incher.
Yeah,
I dig it.
the 35. I was surprised you went that long.
You know, if I was taking it elk hunting, I'd probably want to downsize, shave a little weight.
But you're getting good speed out of it, right?
Impressive, because I'm shooting a 530 grain arrow, and I'm just right at that 290. So I've got a good heavy arrow, and still, you know, above the 280s.
Yeah.
So spitting it out there good, shoots. It just points good.
Yeah.
I was playing with them over there, you know, and that because I want to run a naked bow. And when I say naked, I want to just put a sight and a quiver on it. That's all I've got on it. I didn't want to run stabilizer. I want something sleek. When I get in the brush, I can go through the brush. If I'm crawling through the corn, I can crawl through the corn with it.
Yep.
You know, and I was just like, I want all the stuff off. And I started holding them out, pointing them. And the 35 naturally, because it's a long riser and it's got some butt end weight down there because of more riser stuck down there. It just, with nothing on it, it just held out there better. And I was like, and
there you go.
You know, and I've practiced with it at, you know, 60 and in quite a few shots, and boy, it seems to put them right where I want it with no stabilizer and all that stuff on it.
Yeah.
So
we've got a 31 in the shop if you guys want to shoot it. We've got the PSE Mach 33 in the shop if you want to shoot it. We've got the PSE Decree in the shop if you want to shoot it.
I haven't even seen them.
Yeah. And
get around a little bit.
Yeah. So next week we will have the new Matthews on Tuesday, and the following week we will have Bowtech's new releases. Don't know what they are, but we'll see what they are.
And if you haven't, if you've got a buck killed this year and you haven't sent us your pictures, send your pictures in.
Yeah. Make sure you send them. Make sure you can either email them to ultraproductsltd@gmail.com, or you can send them to the Facebook page. Make sure you put Up Your Game 2024 and include your name, the county and state that you killed it in, and also the date of your harvest. All that information goes online as well. That way, when we post it on Facebook, people know where you killed it.
And don't forget, take the best picture that you can take.
Yeah.
Because at the end of all this, we're going through all of them. We're all going to personally in the shop vote on the picture we like the best together unanimously. And then you're going to get a big old banner stuck on the side of the building. And at the end of the year, you come get it. Next year you can come get it.
So last year we had Seth Healy that won the banner. So he's outside on the side of the building, and he will be replaced before too long. And so who knows?
And he may come get his banner.
Yeah, and he may get replaced by himself.
By himself.
So
yeah,
who knows?
Hope he does. Or we hope he at least gets a chance to.
Here's the deal. If you take good pictures and you provide us with something that looks quality, we'll put you on the side of the building and we'll promote you and the deer that you killed.
Yeah.
So,
and it's not necessarily about it being the biggest deer. It's a cool, quality, good, all-around picture.
I don't care if it's a kid with a fork horn.
Yeah.
If it's a good picture and it is better than all the rest, we'll put it up there.
If it speaks to us, it's going outside.
That's right. Also, next week, I believe we will have PJ Riley on the show.
Hey, from Lancaster Archery.
So
everybody knows PJ.
Yeah,
right?
PJ's a good dude, and he's agreed to come on the show. So next week we should have PJ on the show, given everything works out. So Anything else we need to tell the people?
Speak the language, talk to them.
That's right.
You know,
probably can't say that. That's probably copywritten. So
well, talk the language.
Speak the language. So
and well, if you're using a Primos call, you want to speak the language.
Well, that's true. Yep. Probably not copywritten in that scenario.
Yeah. So allegedly.
Allegedly.
Everything I hear nowadays, if you put allegedly on the back of it, you're all right.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. Yeah. So get out there. Main thing this time of year is just be out there.
Yeah, that's right. Get in the stand. Know that God loves you and we love you too. So
yeah.
All right. We appreciate it. This has been episode 43. Can you believe it? 43 episodes.
Creeping in on 50.
That's right. And we're going to keep cranking them out because because we ain't got nothing else to do on Thursday night. So
well, yeah.
But until next week, we'll catch up with you guys later. This has been up for discussion. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.